I think we stopped at leaders or good leaders or leaders of this age don't command, but rather connect and collaborate. And there's a really interesting metaphor I read about comparing leadership with a conductor of an orchestra. Here I'm going to read this quote. It's slightly long, but I would really like to share it with you. So I'm just going to read it off here. The essential work of a conductor has never really been about the exercise of authority. Conducting is really about the creation of a culture of responsibility, of respect, of musical and social awareness, and of listening. Conducting is a metaphor, not for absolute power, but for shared experience, for collaboration, and for listening. This is a quote by Tom Service, the author of a book called Music as Alchemy, where he actually talks about the importance of the role of a conductor. And I think we all have seen how great conductors are just performing so silently. They know exactly when to adjust the music. They know exactly when something goes loud in one section, how to yes, Music as Alchemy, a really good book. So and conductors are really are great examples, because they just manage, and I think more than manage, they actually lead the whole set of orchestra, musicians, performers, without really having to say anything. So it's interesting how there is a large part of communication, but also not with speaking. Welcome back. Sorry again I really don't know what happened. Welcome back, everyone. We can learn leadership from different fields and professions. Yes, absolutely. I think we've commonly gotten used to comparing it to the field of maybe the common fields. Hospitality is a great one we learn a lot from, especially in the fields of customer service. But I think there's a lot to learn, like you said, from different fields, different professions. Inshallah. So like we said, the conductor is basically listening to everyone and guiding everyone. And I think that's again a great reminder about how listening is key to everything a leader can do. So and listening really is the key, and being open about ideas really opens up innovation. I'd like to share an example here personally about myself. Throughout my career, I always had ideas, but I think I was always, like many people, a little skeptical about maybe if this idea doesn't succeed, or maybe people would disregard this idea or think it's not good enough. And I think really what has happened recently in terms of how we do things, and especially that amidst times where things were in the form of a crisis, everyone was welcome to really share thoughts and ideas that could help. So it didn't really, at that point in time, we weren't thinking about these points of whether this idea is a success or this idea would not be a success. We were thinking of how do we support each other. And what was fascinating is when the goal for all of us was really how do we support each other and how do we support our teams, considering, let's say, we can't be together, considering we still need to launch systems or come up with new ways of doing things, with everyone being away from each other, but we still had an agenda to follow. At that point in time, it didn't matter where the idea was coming from. It could be from maybe the most junior employee in the business, but whoever had an idea that was of value, we immediately implemented it. And no one even said, so even that was even for me, I think at that point in time, I didn't think of whether this is the right time to think of whether this idea would be of value or not, but rather, will this help others do their work better? Will this way of conducting, let's say, a learning session be beneficial? Can we rely on online training for system launches? All these thoughts, and how can we make the business go ahead and still follow our agenda in those times, it didn't matter who it was coming from. It didn't matter if this idea was a success or not, because we were all testing. And if it worked, great and well. If not, let's move on to the next thing. And I think I go back to Zahir's point about agility in even the way we're doing things. It's no longer about, okay, this did not work, should we, go back to it and keep blaming the person who came up with this idea. We just disregard it, move ahead and try something new. So agility in everything we do. An idea is an idea no matter where it comes from, and I think this is really our role. So to address the points on leaders, I think one of the first points I would definitely talk about a quality of a leader is their ability to be open. And openness here is welcoming an idea no matter where it comes from. It could be from someone, maybe not necessarily we like their way of working or their way of thinking, but openness is that ability to listen even when the idea is totally against mine, or that opinion does not match with my opinion. That's really openness. And it's fascinating how openness can really lead to different ways of doing things. So Hind, I totally relate. The next point, so like I said, there were these different the different points on the white paper from Skillsoft, and one of the points they present, so I'm just sharing a few points. One of the other points they shared, which was really interesting for me, so this new age or digital age or new leadership does not require skill sets or just skill sets. It also requires new mindsets. I'm not so sure if you've ever thought of this concept before, but compare skill set with mindset. So we definitely need to acquire skills. Let's say a chess player. A chess player needs to know how to move the pieces around. That's a skill. Yeah. So the ability or the understanding of what this step will do or this move will do is a skill. But the skill is of not much value if there is no context around it. The context here is really the mindset. What we mean by the mindset or the context here is, what is the effect of this move on the overall strategy? Foresight, being able to see beyond just this step, the effect of this step on a bigger picture. That's really mindset. So a skill set can be acquired, it can be learned, but mindsets, they require continuous learning. So I think really again, and this addresses the point I think we spoke about leadership, one of the crucial elements of leadership is to always be learning. And I know in times where we faced especially when we were amidst the pandemic, many people thought that learning was not essential, or learning is not the priority now. But interestingly, what saved us was our ability to adapt to the new ways, and we could not have done that without learning. And here this brings me to the concept of learning agility. And just before I do that, I want to make sure we haven't missed any comments. Embracing differences. Yes, differences of opinion, differences of background. It all stems from even differences of interests. Yeah, being able to be open, even when that idea doesn't match mine, really is a great skill. Something that I think, is something that requires regular development. Diversity also promotes having different people with different ideas who have different views and ideas that can help to improve and develop. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Foresight definitely is a huge aspect. Lovely thoughts here. So back to our point of learning agility. And what do we mean by learning agility? Learning agility is the ability to handle situations that we were not accustomed to. So when faced with a problem, knowing what to do and adapt to that quickly is really learning agility. And that's something you cannot really test until you face a situation. So how do we develop that? How do we keep ourselves, and here I'd like to invite you to even share your comments, how do we prepare ourselves of something we don't know? Like, for example, the recent example we've gone through. How am I ready to handle a situation that I still don't know of? Yeah. Please share your comments. Let's read the comments as we get further comments. The problem, Zahar says, the problem is it is very difficult to bring the change to an organization that is still working on bureaucratic mentality, especially if the resistance comes from higher management. I absolutely relate to what you have said, probably in certain experiences in the past, Zahar. I think really what is your role as an individual in that organization is to still do whatever you can do within within the limitations. I do understand that's a clear limitation. What I would recommend is always still be open about your thoughts. So someone, or maybe a manager or a leader practicing a bureaucratic approach, sometimes might not even be aware. So where you have an opportunity to express, I would always say do that, even if you're the only one doing that. But on a longer term, organizations that follow this methodology know that this is it's not a long existence to maintain it this way. Organizations that have realized that democratizing leadership they followed democratizing leadership, I think have already started benefiting from the situation. So like we said, being an individual, I do understand it is definitely challenging. This is a limitation. What I would always recommend is speak up where you have an opportunity, express your opinions, always back it up by facts if you can. So always when you want to support or defend an idea, I would always say be prepared with facts, with research. But on the long term, if this is not a place where you think you can develop and grow as an individual, I think that's the time where you should consider what is your next step. And I will talk about this particular point. But till your next step, what I would say, Zahar, is be prepared for that next step. So we don't know when that next step will happen, or maybe if it's a career move or an organizational move, but what I can recommend for you now is be prepared for it until it happens. Yeah. Like digitalization, yes, it's affected everywhere. It has demanded new leadership by default. Today, we used to talk previously about trusting your employee. Now, let's say you have a team reporting to you. They're working remotely. You have no option but to trust them. Now, the question is not about trusting them, but the question is about, are you motivating them? Are you influencing them? Are you encouraging them to come up with ideas and innovative plans? Fatma says, we've spoken about positive kinds of leaderships. What about the negative, toxic ones? Which ones should be aware of? Or can you give some examples? Really interesting points and questions, Fatma. I think we should really have a discussion. I'm excited about having, in fact, also a one-to-one discussion on all of these. I think we always, and I think no one has ever faced a situation, and I think you can also relate, Fatma, here, where you've not been faced with maybe a leader or a manager who has not been the best or supported your ideas. But there's always a learning. Now, for me, I'm a firm believer of use the best out of any situation. And since you are in that situation, that means there's something definitely for you to learn. Now, as long as I'm in the situation, I'll try to make use of everything that is available in front of me. Like I've mentioned to Zahar, if I realize eventually this is not the right place for me, or this is not the right situation for me to be in, before I give up, and I think this is a big one, before I just decide to leave or walk away, or maybe I find another opportunity, I think it's very essential to highlight and express thoughts. I think what we don't do enough of, maybe as people who are not in positions of authority within an organization, is we feel that we should not express. And a lot of times when we talk to leaders and managers of different within our teams, we find very interestingly that when they talk about their team, they talk about their team sometimes as people who don't come up with ideas. And why is that? So there's this fear of an employee maybe sharing or expressing or coming up with ideas. I think our role is big in changing that. Wherever we have an opportunity, we need to be expressing what we believe in, what we think is right for the business. And like I said, I think we need to also back it up. So I would say never lose an argument. So maybe your idea doesn't get through, but don't lose the argument. And you can never lose an argument if it's backed up by research and facts. Yeah. So I think we need to be practicing that more often. That's what I would say. Other than that, I think we are all, even when we are faced with maybe difficult situations, at the end of the day, we are here to support an organization. So even someone at the top who might not be of support, but eventually has an agenda, and their agenda or their target is for the organization's good. I think that's what we should be tackling on. A generations gap. Yes, I think we can also relate here to a good example. We all agree that the new generation, I think some of us are from the new generation, but I mean the new generation has forced in the workplace new ways of doing things. So definitely we used to think that whatever is followed in an organization is trickled from top bottom. But I think at the end of the day, no matter what we say, we build the culture of an organization. So I think we should not look at them guiding us, but I think we should widen the scope. And like I say, I think not underestimate the value of your thought or your idea. And wherever you have an opportunity, express it and present it. Consistency is key. Consistency is definitely key in everything we do. So if you decide to, let's say, change the bureaucratic way of how things are done, or if you decide to tackle a challenging situation with maybe a toxic manager, it's not a one-time activity. It's a consistent activity. What are the skills we need to acquire? I think we've mentioned quite a few. I remember, I would like to share here a very quick example. In my, maybe this was back in 2000 and around 15 or 16, I had the change of managers, and I didn't like the new way that the new manager, so my previous manager had given me a lot of autonomy, a lot of independence, a lot of ability to be creative, and that worked really well for me. I'm someone who delivers under those circumstances, and I think most of us are like that. We like autonomy, we like independence, we like to be able to take decisions. And when I moved to this new manager was the kind who would like for me to execute. And I think we all relate to this example. And in the beginning, I was disappointed. I was put off. I thought I could not perform like this. But then my previous manager told me something that was really enlightening for me. I still share it with many of my colleagues today. He said to me, he actually sat with me. It was a one-to-one coaching session. He said to me, Laila, you know what? It's not your manager who decides how he should manage you, but you as an employee can also decide how you want to be managed. And you have a large role to play in that. And it doesn't have to be, like a fight for me to present how I'd like to be managed. But I think it was as simple as actually having a talk, and every time presented with the way of how my new manager wanted me to do things, I would express how I wanted to do them. So I think one of the skills is also being able to confront. I think that's a big one. Yeah. I hope that has been addressing a few of the points of where you're faced with kind of challenging situations. Yes, who comes first, leaders or their teams? I think in today's world with the agile teams, I think it's everyone together. I think the leaders are actually defining, I think the role of leaders really is context. Like we said, it's mindset. And like even we say in the world of learning, we don't deal with young learners, right? So I'm in the field of learning and development and training, and when we train, we have individuals who are adult learners, and adult learners all come with backgrounds and experiences of their own. It's not about me imparting knowledge anymore. It's about how do we facilitate the knowledge. I train in the automotive industry. I have some of my trainees who know about technical aspects of vehicles way beyond my experience and way beyond my knowledge. And I think here my role is not really to have more knowledge than that person, but to be able to facilitate the knowledge within the group by bringing out what that person has and allowing that person to share it in a group in a way that I facilitate and manage that discussion. At the end of the day, people don't leave the session saying Layla's participant had more knowledge. They would just say we learned a lot from the session. I think as a leader, that thought of I'm better or I should know more or I need to acquire more knowledge should drop. I think our role, the role of the leader really is to facilitate, to be able to look at the bigger picture, the strategy, to understand the strengths of the people in the team and to just highlight those strengths. So I think it's the team altogether. Culture gets built from bottom to top, not the other way. Yes, I think it's always a misconception that we think we wait for instructions, and that's really our I would say that's the way we need to change the way we would like to be managed, like the example I just shared. I like Steve Jobs' method in building organization culture based on experience and skills. Absolutely. And we see these organizations that believe in their talent and just highlighting a talent of their teams is really organizations that thrive. Coaching, yes, I'll talk about coaching in a moment. Smart leaders surround themselves with smarter people. Yes, I think really now, even if you look at examples within your organizations, people no longer accredit this person for doing something. They always talk about the team. Yeah. EQ and AQ, adaptability, quotient, or intelligence, are seen more important than IQ in today's world of leadership. What do you think? I think very good point, Fatma. I would relate to something we discussed in the beginning, and I would like to again emphasize on it. Thank you for raising this point. I think really, Fatma, knowledge is important, but it's not the knowledge that's important, it's what we do with this knowledge. So not acquiring the knowledge, but how do we implement this knowledge is crucial. And that's really EQ and AQ. So IQ, I need the knowledge, I need information. We all know knowledge is power, right? But knowledge, not doing anything with it, is not power. It's when you implement it. And I think that's also the difference between skill set and mindset. So acquiring knowledge, acquiring skills is great, but if you cannot practice it, you don't have the right mindset, it's of no value. So back to learning agility, and we said that learning agility is your ability to handle situations which you were not used to, or a problem that you were not expecting. Now, how do you develop these skills? How do you develop learning when you still don't know what's going to happen next? I think that really is related to the concept of mindset as well. So I think a few questions for reflection, and I would like you to actually note them down or maybe do them after the session. I'd like you to think of these 3 questions. What did I learn before? What did I learn today? And what do I want to learn? I think this really should be a frequent set of questions or points for reflection that we need to ask ourselves. What have I learned yesterday or before? Not necessarily yesterday. What have I learned today, and what do I want to learn? And not keep it as a point of just let it be the way it is. We need to actually schedule learning for ourselves, not treat it as a given or granted or as a taken that I will learn in the process. And that's really learning agility. For companies, learning agility is no more about go to a course and come back. Definitely those courses are of use, but learning agility is how do we equip our staff to know where to go to when they need information. It's again about that integration of work and learning. Like we spoke about integration of life and work in the past, learning and work now is also integrated. We don't really need to acquire knowledge for something that, yes, we need maybe technical knowledge for a new role or a particular piece of work that we're handling. But in terms of understanding how to handle the situation or skill sets, what we really need to do is create a platform or create maybe a culture where I have allowed people to choose their learning, to know where to go to when they need that learning. That's a crucial one. And I think whether it's you or your teams, these are really 3 important questions to ask ourselves. What have I learned before? What have I learned today? And what do I want to learn? And lastly, there's a foresight as well. Yes, in fact, it's becoming a trend now. Foresight, you'll notice a lot of courses now are around the future, and how do we connect to that future? Yes, and I think it's an individual responsibility now. Really, learning is an individual responsibility. Creating, I think, as a leader, being able to make sure you attend those workshops or encourage learning within a team, it needs to start with you first. And again, those questions for reflection. So actually scheduling time for learning, not treat learning as a given or taken. There's just one last bit of information I'd like to share with you and I think this addresses a lot of the points on leadership. A very crucial one: feedback. Feedback and I really like the concept of feed forward. I'm not so sure if you've been acquainted with feed forward, a concept by Marshall Goldsmith. So feedback, and I think I relate also to the question we got asked earlier about coaching. So when do I use feedback or feed forward, and when do I use coaching? And let's talk about we'll also talk about feed forward in the next couple of minutes. So firstly, feedback and coaching. When do we use what? If you are familiar with coaching is when you really want to improve performance. Let's say there's a particular gap, you want to address it, and you believe that this person in front of you has the talent and skills, and every person has the talent and skills, and you want to bring those out. So you want to export someone's potential to cover that gap. That's coaching. Feedback is when you need to give information or receive information. And this is a big one, because leaders are not only people who need to give feedback, they also need to receive feedback. And feedback, to make sure that feedback is of value, feedback should not go back to blaming an individual. Feedback should not be about who do we put the blame on, or feedback should not be advice. Feedback should be based on facts. Let's say this is a particular strength, or this is a particular weakness, and this is what needs to be done. It needs to be holistic, it needs to be actionable, it needs to have a perspective in mind, and it needs to really work on what's next, what's the next step, not looking back anymore. And that's why we talk about feed forward. Feed forward is a concept by Marshall Goldsmith, and I really like a quote by Marshall Goldsmith where he says, what got you here won't get you there. So wherever you are in your workplace now, what got you here is great, but it will not get you to the next step. And that's what you really need to be thinking about. And that's why I always say receiving feedback is crucial, because that really helps you to go to the next step. Feed forward, however, is about highlighting strengths. So feed forward is looking at what's the person's strengths and developing them. Feed forward is really an activity where you can sit together as a group, and everyone can actually themselves decide for themselves what are their areas of development. And then everyone across the room can give their opinions about how that person can develop that area of weakness or development. And that recipient should just thank every person in the group and take the advice without commenting, without saying this did not work, I tried this in the past, to actually accept it with an open mind. It works really well. It works fabulously well because the person themselves have decided for themselves that this is their weakness area or this is their area of development. So naturally they are more open to receive feedback. It works a lot, especially if you have a team. I would definitely say try it. It brings up a really friendly discussion, very open, very honest. I do this on a daily basis, at least an hour every day. Was that about learning? That's a really good point. Feed forward is a great concept, absolutely. Feedback should be two ways, not only one. Yes, and like we said, we always get asked this question: when do we use feedback and when do we use coaching? I would say wherever you have facts, use feedback. Wherever you want to develop an individual or address a gap, use coaching. What got you here won't get you there. Marshall Goldsmith. Yes. So that brings me to the end of the discussion. I think, yeah, we also got constructive feedback. Absolutely. That brings me to the end of the discussion. Again, I apologize for the technical issue that we faced in between. It was great having you all with us. I wish you a great rest of the day and evening rather, and hope to catch up with all of you again really soon. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hind. Pleasure.